Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait a few minutes, as always, to allow more people to join in. Going to wait about another minute or so. I still see more attendees joining. All right, I think it's a good time to start. 10:03. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Today, this is a repeat of one I did about 2 months ago. It's not going to be a full comprehensive webinar about all aspects of submitting online applications. This is simply like a tips and tricks to help you submit the recommendations properly without errors or any confusion on our end, your end. Some common misconceptions and things to keep in mind, especially for newer people, could be helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint now. There we go. Okay. So to start off here, this whole thing's over at 10:45, so I'm going to get through the presentation, keep an eye on the clock, and then we'll have some time for Q&A, I think, at the end. All right. So first, I'm going to cover some resources. If you're new, you need to know how to find all the resources for everything online applications. So I'm going to show you where to get those. We're going to talk about document codes, common mistakes, tips, misconceptions, whatnot. A little time for a live demo, and then the Q&A. So your main resource guide is going to be what we call the SIG, the Credential Information Guide. And this is pretty much just for us here at the commission and for you out in the field. So it's a semi-private site. There's the link there. You can get to it from our main homepage as well. If you click on employee and agency, it'll take you straight to the SIG, and that's the username and password to get in. SIG 2011, the password CTC guide. That is your main source for all of the forms, guides. All of these webinars that we're doing are being recorded and being posted there, so you can go back and rewatch them. Brittany and I have done a few now, and we're going to continue to do them, so they're all saved there. There is a new updated guide as well for non-program submitters. So those are going to be like your emergency permits. There's a new update guide for that as well. So first things first, talk about some of the codes. When you're submitting an online application, there are different codes that you choose when you're looking for the list to submit. Some of them say FT and some say NT. So what's the difference between FT and NT? The common misconception. FT stands for first time. So that's the code that you're going to select when you're recommending for the educator's first issuance of any permit or credential, with the exception of the three listed here: the certificate of clearance, activity supervisor clearance certificate, and any waiver, which shows up as a W when you're looking at their documents. If they have any of these previously, these don't count as any sort of permit or credential. So therefore, the one that you are recommending for is going to be a first time. On the other hand, if they do have any other credential or permit previously issued to them, you're going to select new type. So if they have at least one of any other previous document, it's going to get a new type. An example there, if the educator holds a substitute permit already, and now you're recommending them for any sort of preliminary credential, or emergency permit, any other permit or credential, the document category type should be NT. So we see a lot of that being mixed up a lot of the times, especially with the newer people. So that's something to keep in mind. There's also confusion between renewal and reissuance. RN is renewal, RI is reissuance, and we need to talk about what the difference is between those two. So RN means renewal. We use this code when you're recommending a clear credential upgrade and the preliminary credential has not yet expired. So preliminary credential, still valid, still current. They're ready for the upgrade. You're submitting the clear credential upgrade. The code's going to be RN every time. RI means reissuance, and that's the code that you're going to use when the preliminary credential has already expired. Obviously, this is less common. Most people have a current preliminary when they're ready for their clear. So RI, keep that in mind, that's not going to be used too often. It's much more common to use the RN, yet we still see a lot of RIs, and we have to change that before we grant the recommendation. So saves everybody a lot of time if you pay attention to the preliminary's expiration date and whether or not it's going to be a reissue or a renewal. Little helpful tip I put down there at the bottom. RN, you're going to use that if there's no gap in credential coverage for the particular document that you're upgrading. RI, you're going to use when there is a gap in credential coverage for that credential type. Okay, so when you're adding authorizations, you must retain the expiration date of the credential you are adding to. I think most of you know that just as a general concept. It's just a matter of when you are setting up the added authorization. Sometimes I think maybe you're not clicking edit to edit the dates. And so that's something that we have to do on our end before we can grant it and complete it. So let's keep that in mind, that it must retain the expiration date of the credential that you're adding to. It doesn't get a new expiration date. It has to stay the same. So when you're submitting it, you can click edit and change the expiration date to to match the original document. The document category should be AA, which is added authorization. It should not be a standalone credential issued as a new type. This is a common mistake for the PPS credentials, the Pupil Personnel Services credentials, like counseling, social work, school psychology. Those seem to get recommended a lot as new types when an educator already holds one of those. And in fact, what you're doing is you're adding the authorization to a pre-existing credential. So that's a common mistake that we see. I think I bring it up on another slide and coming up, so I'll touch upon that again. But if it's an added authorization, make sure you're not setting up as a whole new standalone new type. Bilingual authorizations should never also have the English Learner Authorization Code. So you can delete that when you're setting up for the first time. I think I talked with a few of you in the field to confirm that when you're doing an added authorization for a bilingual, you cannot, I don't think you actually have the ability to delete the English Learner code when you're setting it up as an added authorization. So shouldn't really be on this slide, but when you're setting it up for the first time, if you're submitting a preliminary credential with a bilingual authorization, you can delete the English Learner Authorization code at that time before you submit it. They should never be on the same document. All right, so next we'll talk about expiration dates. So here's some good tips for you. I know a lot of the times the expiration date is pre-populated, and if you can edit it in certain instances, it's really helpful because otherwise we have to edit it. So Ryan dating, right? It's what we call Ryan dating based on the Ryan credential. They must always be rounded up to the first of the following month. So I got some examples there. If it's going from September 12th, 2022, the expiration date should be rounded up to October 1st, 5 years later, if it's a 5-year document. Another example, if it is issued on the first of a month, so let's say April 1st, 2016, it still gets rounded up to the first of the following month. So May 1st, 2021. It does not go from April 1st to April 1st. That's a common misconception that we see a lot with clear online app recommendations. A lot of the times they will come through going from the first of the month straight to the first of the month, and they need to be rounded up. Even if it's the first of the month, the issuance date, it still gets rounded up. Dependent documents. Now, these must expire on the same date as the base credential. And most common examples of dependent documents are administrative credentials, the SC1As, the TC3As, which are agriculture credential, the RLLS, the reading specialist, and SC2Bs. These are all common dependent documents that have to expire on the same date as the base teaching credential. Now, I am aware that preliminary admin credential expiration dates cannot be altered by you. That's something that we do after you submit the recommendation, but the clear admin expiration dates can be altered. So keep an eye out when you're submitting for a clear admin credential to line up the expiration date with the base credential expiration date. One guide really helpful if you're confused about dependent document dating is the CIA 17-01. You can find that on the SIG. Highly recommend it. I'm just having it, saved for any reference if you're curious about how dependent dating works. More about the admin credential, because we do see a lot of errors on these ones in particular. So they're one of the more complicated ones, so we see a lot of mistakes. Like I said before, they are dependent documents. So the issuance date must be during the term of a valid, the issuance date must be during the term of a valid base credential, and they must expire on the same date as that base credential. The expiration date cannot be edited on a preliminary admin, like I mentioned, so don't worry about it, we'll fix it. But they can be changed on the clear admin recommendations. So I want you all to watch out for that. When you're setting up the recommendation, make sure you look at the base credential expiration date. The recommendation must expire on the same date that it's aligned with the base credential that's current at the time they're issuing it. I'll show you some examples. Because if you're not careful, this can result in a really short admin credential, and that's not good for the educator. They might spend $100 to just have it for 1 month when it could have been avoided. So I'll show you some examples of that. Okay, so here we go. This is a clear admin credential that was incorrectly issued for the full 5 years instead of using dependent dating. So this is an example of it got submitted with the expiration date incorrect, and then maybe somebody on our end made the mistake too. Maybe it slipped through both of our fingers, and maybe we were in a hurry, we granted it, and you can see the expiration date of September 1st, 2027, that's incorrect, because the base credential, you see here, this is our current base credential during this term. It expires on August 1st of 2024. So therefore, expiration date on the clear admin should have been August 1st, 2024. The admin credential can never outlive the base credential. So that's an example of a correction that would have to be made because that expiration date is not correct. So another example here. This is pretty common. There are times when, as the submitter, you can miss an opportunity for the educator to get a full 5-year term. You see this example here. This is the current base credential. Well, let's say this one here is the current base credential. So it goes from 2019 to 2025. This was their base credential at the time when the clear admin was being set up. And by choosing this issuance date of July 20th, you're forcing the commission to link it to this base credential down here, which means that it has to expire on January 1st of 2025, which is like a little over 2 years. But if you just pushed it up a little bit, if it wasn't an employment issue, if it was okay to just have it start on August 1st, then we would be able to match it to this base credential, and they would get the full 5 years. So hopefully that makes sense. If it's not an employment emergency that they start on July 20th for this example, and it can wait until August 1st, that would be more beneficial to everybody involved to get the full 5 years. So keep an eye on that. We have to link it to whatever base credential is current at the time. This one up here was not current yet. It was ready to go. The renewal is ready to go starting on August 1st, but it's not current on this date. So you have to watch out for that. So more about admin credential codes. What we see a lot for the preliminary codes is that a lot of the recommendations have either the incorrect renewal code put on there or both of these, when in fact they only get one. They should never have both of these. They only get either the R86L or the R86C. The R86L stands for limited. That means that the educator is not getting the full 5-year term on that preliminary admin credential. So it's being cut short. Even if it's 4 years and 11 months, it's still going to get the R86L code. Now, any time that it links up perfectly with a base credential to get the full 5 years, that's when you're going to select the R86C code or complete. That's a complete 5-year code. So this is something that we see a lot where they're submitted with both of these or the incorrect one. And, you know, if we're not careful, we might accidentally grant it with the wrong code and then have to do a correction. So this is something that we check every day when we get the recommendations. So on your part, if you can be careful with these two codes, it'd be extremely helpful. Now on the other side, we have the clear renewal codes. So for a clear admin, they actually must have both of these codes, the R15P and the R20 code. Every single clear admin recommendation should have both of these. Unfortunately, it's not automatically pre-populated when you set up the recommendation. It probably should be, but I believe the R20 is automatic when you set up the clear, but the R15P you need to select. So if we get this recommendation for a clear admin without both of these, we have to add it before we grant it. All right, intern recommendations. We have seen a huge improvement in this since the last couple webinars and CCAC presentation. So we really appreciate that. The county must always be entered in for intern credentials. When you're setting up the recommendation, this is something I'll show you in the live demo, but when you're setting up the recommendation, it does not have a red mandatory star next to the county box, but it really should, because we cannot issue these without the restriction and the county entered in. So it takes a little extra time if all we see is the district, for example, for the restriction. We only see a charter school or a district, and we're not, we don't have them all memorized, so I'm not sure what district this county belongs into. The analysts here have to take the extra step to figure out what county that district's in, add it in. So if it's already there, it makes everything go by so much faster, especially in the busy season where the restriction in the county is already entered in and we can just approve it. I'll show you that in the live demo. Another thing with this is that the subject authorization code for an intern is not automatically populated. It's something that you have to add in. So sometimes with intern credentials, what we see are the automatic English learner is there, and then the intern authorization code is there, which just is saying this is an intern credential. It's nothing specific, but the subject is missing. It doesn't say English, PE, special ed, that's left blank. So then we have to maybe email you and ask you what subject they were going for. Just creates a delay in the whole process. So you always want to make sure that you're adding the subject authorization for interns. For education specialist credentials, We're kind of in a transitionary period, as many of you know, with the old codes and the new codes. So for the older codes, we often see the autism spectrum disorder code missing that we have to then add in before we can grant it, and that is the AAAS authorization code. And that should always accompany any of the older mild moderate code, which is the R3MM. Those two, think of those two as going together almost always. The only time it would not be added for a mild moderate code is if it was also the moderate severe added to it. The moderate severe R3MS code does not accompany the autism code because autism is subsumed within that program. So it's a redundant code to have the autism as well as moderate severe. So you have this to reference. Like I said, this is on this SIG, and also this is mentioned in the CTC online recommendation user guide, which is great. It's a huge resource, about 75 pages. This is all mentioned there too. So for the old codes, the autism spectrum code should be added with mild moderate, but it's not going to be added for the moderate severe code. Or early childhood, I should mention that as well. That does not get the autism code. So we see these recommendations go both ways. Sometimes we see the autism code when it belongs there. We should see it and it belongs there and it's not. And then other times we see it added and it shouldn't be there and we have to delete it. So keep an eye out for that. Thankfully with the new codes, which we should be only getting the new codes here pretty soon as the old programs are finishing up, the new codes do not use the autism spectrum AAAS code at all. So that's going to be a lot cleaner for all of us. It's not so much to remember. For example, the R3MN, which is the moderate needs, and the R3EN, extensive needs, those will never include this autism code. So looking forward to that. That should clean up all the data very easily. Service credentials, like the speech language pathology credentials, the preliminaries often get recommended with these two renewal codes. The 36EX, that's going to belong on every single speech language pathology credential recommendation that goes on every single one. But the SLPT might not belong. And we get a lot of these where it's on there and we have to delete it before we can grant it. The SLPT stands for the speech language pathology test, and that does not get included on a preliminary recommendation if your educator has passed the Praxis SLP exam. Now, if you don't have that information, if they didn't tell you that they passed it and offered you, a copy of the exam, that's fine. Just leave it on and we'll take care of it. It is something that we can see in the CTC database when we look them up. So it recently came to my attention that as a submitter, you might not even know if they passed that test or not. So we'll take care of it if you don't know. But if you do know, if they have a copy of the exam that they're showing you, leave this code off for any preliminary SLP. For pupil personnel services, such as counseling, school psychology, school social work, you're always going to check first to make sure to see if they already hold a clear SC5. Because if they do, then your recommendation has to be submitted as an added authorization, not a whole new separate new type. I mentioned this before a few slides ago. It's something common that we see. You get a recommendation for school social work, for example, and it's submitted to us as a completely new document, a new type, but the educator actually already holds a school psychology, for example, and it's still current. So that recommendation was submitting an error. It should have been set up as an added authorization with the same expiration date as the original. And really what you're doing is just adding a whole new subject area to a current credential. All right, so we're getting to the end here. It's about 10:30, so that's good timing. This is just some bits and ends here, tips, reminders. When you're upgrading to a clear credential, you have to click on the edit button to change the issuance and expiration dates. When you're attaching transcripts, or really any supporting materials, make sure they're legible first. Sometimes we get them and we can't even read them, so they're pretty useless, and then we have to, send you the email, and it just adds on more time. So make sure they're legible if you can, and that the college university name is clearly stated. And if not, you can include a note on the attachment to tell us the college name. Every once in a while, it's maybe a weird online portal version of a transcript, and it actually doesn't say the university name, so it's hard for us to enter in that data. If your attachment is over 10 MB, then it's going to be too big, and you're probably going to get some sort of error, and that's when you would have to split it into more than one attachment. Common question that we get is, as a submitter, do you have to submit the materials as separate attachments? And the answer is no. You do not have to. If you're including, let's say, basic skills requirement, paperwork, transcripts, letters, any supporting material, that could all be in one attachment. That's perfectly fine as long as the size isn't over 10 megabytes. So keep an eye on that. If you get an error message about the size, then just split it up and send it to us in 2 different attachments. Last reminder here, the 90-day rule. Still see a lot of these mistakes coming in with the 90-day rule, and I'm referring to the issuance date, and that you can backdate any issuance date up to 90 days in the past. We generally think of that as just 3 months. But you need to make sure that it's from the recommendation completion date. So if the program completion date, that cannot be, the issuance date can never be before the program completion date, of course, because the recommendations all need to be set up properly that way. So the 90-day rule can only work if all the requirements have been met. If you submit a recommendation and it's beyond the 90 days, the analyst will most likely just grant the document with your entry date. So the date that you set up the document. So if you ever see a credential that was granted with a date, not the one that you requested, probably why. It was probably past the 90-day. So if I still have you, I think what I'll do now is a quick live demo. I think I'll do an intern submission. Give me just a minute to transition here. Okay. And first. All right, so this is our test version of what you would do as a submitter. So unfortunately, it's not perfect. I don't have all of the same codes you might in the field because it is just a test program, but there are a few things I could show you. Okay, so when you log in, what you're going to see here is the educator's main information page here. And click next. Now, whether you click approve institutions or authorize agencies depends on what you're submitting for. Authorized agencies are going to be for the non-program submitters, emergency permits. We're going to go for the approved institutions because we want to do intern recommendation. So once you click that, you're going to see a list of what the educator, the documents that they've already been issued. In this case, there's a whole bunch of stuff here because it's just a test program. But we're going to go to create a new document. Click new. And I'm just going to make up some dates here. Say first. And I'm going to ask that it be issued same date. Now, if you click on the applet, you should be able to see all of the programs that you are authorized for in your agency. In this case, I want single subject intern. So I'm going to choose this one here. Single subject intern. This is where you choose whether it's going to be first time or new type. In this example, I'm going to pretend the only thing this person has is a COC. So they have a certificate of clearance, which means this is definitely going to be their first time that they're issued anything. Click OK. That automatically fills in some stuff here. Now, this is where I feel like a lot of you will click save and move on. But really what we want you to do is complete these two boxes as well. Subject matter qualification route. Now for interns, they do have to meet subject matter before they qualify, and we want to know how they did that. So the easy one is if they pass the CSATs, right? You're just going to select examination. If they completed coursework through your program and that's been verified by your evaluation, you can simply select subject matter by coursework. If they did one CSAT and some other courses, you know, any sort of mixture between the two, you're going to select coursework and exam combination. In this case, this is an art intern credential. So if they have a bachelor's degree or higher in art, you can select degree major. Let's go ahead and select that one for fun. The county now, this is where I was talking about, often gets missed. So here, we would like you to put in whatever county is associated with the restriction. I'm going to go ahead and just put in Sacramento. Now I can save it. And now this is what I was referring to about entering in the subject. You see here the English learner code, ELAS, is here, but there is no subject. So we're going to have to click on new and add it in. So new is over here. And this is, if you click on the applet here, you should have your program choices. the subject choices that you're authorized for. In this case, it's not showing up because it's a test program and it's a little incomplete. But if you're authorized to submit for an art intern, it should show up here. You know, either art or art X if they pass the CSATs, and then you should be able to select it and add it in. I can't, but just imagine that it's there, and then you can click save. And that's going to do it for an intern. Then you just go down to the bottom right corner and select next. So what I'd like to do now, we have a little time left, just a few minutes. See if we have any questions. Somebody just said thank you for helping you at CCSE. You're welcome. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, you can. Like I mentioned before, the webinars that Brittany and I are doing are all posted on the SIG. So if you go to the SIG, click on CTC Online Recommendations, you're going to see recorded versions of all. I think this is the 4th one, and we're going to continue to do them. So you have access to all of these. I believe we're actually posting the PowerPoint itself as well. So you can have access to the recording and the PowerPoint.
Right now, really quick, and sorry for my voice, you guys. We are having the webinars, the recorded webinars are posted on SIG. We are working on getting the PowerPoints ADA compliant and then posted. So those will eventually be up, but as of right now, they are not, but they will eventually.
Right. Yeah, so I was looking at it earlier. I didn't see the PowerPoint, so that explains it. But the videos are, the webinars posted there for your reference. And I can't stress enough, the actual CTC online user guide is pretty great. It covers pretty much everything I can think of. A couple more questions. The old education specialist codes, somebody asked if any credential permit gets renewed, if the codes get updated to the new ones, and they do not automatically get updated to the new ones. If somebody had a preliminary under the old codes and then they are upgrading to declare, it's going to stay at the old codes. Any new permit that's being issued, for example, any PIP or STIP that's now being issued, they're automatically going to get the new codes. We choose the restriction, it shares the employment and the county. So I still don't understand why we must select county at the top. You know, I mean, I agree with you. It should all just be pre-populated once you select that, and then once we get the data. But as analysts here, when we open up the application before we can grant it or, you know, deny it, that county area is blank still. So the only way that we can get that completed is if you put it in at the top, save it before you submit the recommendation. That might change in the future. I mean, I hope it does. There's going to be a lot of changes to the online system, so hopefully that will never be an issue again. But as of now, if you could please just enter in the county at the top, save it, save everybody a lot of time. I got a question. Can you provide a little more information about issuance dates? I'm not sure exactly what aspect of it you need more clarification on, but you can always email us or come to the live chat, which is Monday through Friday. If you email us, we'll be happy to explain, or you can check out the resources on the SIG. But you know, maybe you're asking about the 90-day rule, or the relation to an issuance date to the candidate program completion date, possibly. But yeah, you can send us specific questions through the email. All right, well, let's see. Yeah, it's about 10:46. So, and it's Friday. I'm sure both of you, both of us are going to be enjoying our weekend, and the rest of you are probably having the whole week off, possibly. So enjoy your vacations. We'll end it there. We're going to have more webinars each month, and also, like I said, live chat's always available, and email is always an option as well. So with that, we'll close the webinar and enjoy your weekend and your vacations. Thank you very much.